all cases are different and the faces are different, and it's what keeps it really interesting. Um, you learn a lot about people, about their families, about how they parent, about how they fail to parent, um, how they make money, how they lose money. It's a fun it's a fun experience.
Hey everyone, welcome back to Beyond the Bar podcast. I'm your host, Anisa Tova, and today's guest is one of the most respected names in New York matrimonial law, Michael Stutman, who's a partner at Alter Wolf, Foley and Stutman. He's a seasoned litigator known for his straight talk, strategic thinking, and courtroom presence. Now, he's written 2 books on divorce in New York. He led major legal committees and even worked at a firm that handled Princess Diana's divorce. But beyond the resume, he's also a former offshore yacht racer. Wow, dad of 4, and works side by side with his wife, Dana, at the firm that I cannot wait to hear about. And so today, as always, we're diving into the man behind the reputation. Michael, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Denisa. Nice to be here.
Likewise. So, I don't know that much about you. I know we had worked together a little bit, and I met your lovely wife, Dana, and it's that I cannot wait to hear what that's like. But as I like to do, why don't we start at the beginning? Tell me, how did you get into practice of law, and
Um, I,
why? Why?
well, kind of the same way I can say I got into a lot of things. I kind of fell into it. Um, I was interning in the summer of '74, I think it was, here in New York for an environmental lawyer. And he asked me what I was going to do when I got out of college. And I said, well, I think I'll go to grad school and become a social worker or something. And he said, go to law school. And I said, I don't want to be a lawyer. And he said, well, you don't have to be a lawyer. You can go to law school, and business is like the law degree, and you can always do something with it. That's what you should do. And so I said, okay. And I applied to a number of law schools. The one that let me in was the University of Tulsa. Um, and so I went there thinking I was going to be a criminal prosecutor. I was a big law and order type. And I took criminal law and procedure, and I realized that the deck at that time anyway was pretty well stacked against the prosecutor. So I said, well, I don't want to do that. And I interned with another firm in Tulsa, and I was supervised by the partner who did matrimonial work and personal injury work. And at the end of my tenure there, I asked him if I could have a job at that firm and work with him. And while he said he'd love to have me, he said I wouldn't do well. And I said, well, why wouldn't I do well? And he said, well, um, you are too eager to tell a partner that you don't want to do the work that they're assigning to you, um, because for whatever reason you didn't find it interesting. And the managing partner of the firm was a relatively rabid anti-Semite. And he said, so you're not going to go anywhere. I said, so what do I do? And he said, go run an office. I'll throw you enough business to make sure you don't starve, and do what you can with that. And I did, and he did. And here I am now.
Wow, sounds like he saved you.
Yeah, he did. He did. He was a wonderful man. He was generous. He was a bit of a misogynist, but as you would expect for a past middle-aged male in Tulsa, he was not very evolved. But that worked, and then ultimately I came back to New York, where I grew up, practiced for a little while with my father, who became a lawyer after I did. Um, that it didn't work out as well as either he or I probably had hoped. So we kind of went our separate ways, and matrimonial cases just seemed to keep coming to me. So um, that's what I ended up doing and focusing on, and wrote the first book, and my practice pretty well took off from there.
Tell me about your book.
Well, the first book is called How to Divorce in New York. and I wrote it with it's a second edition of a book that was first written by a friend of mine named Greer Raggio. Um, I sat and watched him interview prospective clients, and they'd ask him how much does it cost, and he'd tell them how much it costs, what his fees were, and they'd say, oh, okay, I'll think about it, and they'd get up and kind of walk to the door, and he'd say, before you go, and he reached under his desk, he said, here, why don't you take this with you? It's a book I wrote, and it might help you kind of sort out what the issues are, how to pick a lawyer, stuff like that. And the client looked at him and said, you wrote the book? And he goes, yeah, I wrote the book. And the client would sit back down and the conversation would continue and they'd ultimately engage him. And I took a look at this book and it was like woefully out of date, just woefully out of date. I said, how can you give them this? And he goes, oh, it is what it is. It's not really a reference. It's more just something to start a thought process going. And I asked him if he ever thought about updating it. He said, well, I know it should be updated, but I don't want to do it. And so I said, well, I'll do it. And he said, well, that's fine. You do it, but then it's your headache. You find the publisher, you design the cover, you do whatever you want. I don't want to have to mess with it. And so I did. There's a much longer story behind that, but I'm already going on and on. But that's how that book came about. And then when I was with the English firm, I was solicited by someone to write another book. This was more of a Q&A format book, just called Divorce in New York. And so I did that as well. And that was kind of the end of my book writing. So I'm waiting for the movies to come out.
You're a great storyteller. I'm curious, what were you into in high school?
Um, just trying to get by. I did not enjoy high school.
Mm.
I was not a particularly popular kid. I was pretty overweight, pretty not particularly popular. I was with a group of kids that were more engaged in their academic pursuits than almost anything else. I was solicited by the coach to play football. I was as tall as I am now, which is just about 6 feet, and about 40 pounds heavier, which would have put me in around 230. And so I was a prime candidate for that, but my dad wouldn't let me play.
Mm.
He indicated that he had just gotten done with some orthodontia work for me, and he wasn't going to let somebody knock my teeth out. So
Do you have any regrets not being able to play football?
no,
No,
not
not
one.
at all.
No, no, no. But I got out of high school in 3 years. Um, and so I was 16 when I graduated and went to college in the Midwest and then went to law school in Oklahoma and ultimately came back here to New York in 1985.
What impresses you about human being?
Their variability. Um,
Mhm.
what makes this particular practice so interesting. Um, yeah, I mean, depending on what kind of day you're having, you can say, well, it's the same cases, different faces, but it's really not that. All cases are different and the faces are different, and it's what keeps it really interesting. Um, you learn a lot about people, about their families, about how they parent, about how they fail to parent. Um, how they make money, how they lose money. It's a fun experience, even now. And I've been doing this for a long time.
Yeah,
40,
yeah.
40 years now.
Wow, 40
Well,
years.
well, 40 years here in New York and 47 years all in.
How do you deal with someone who is there's a level of emotion and then there's a level of emotion. Someone who is so wrapped up in emotion and they're looking for sort of justice and fairness. I mean, we both know that's not what you get in court, right? But it's so important to them. And how do you deal with someone like that?
Well, like I guess with almost anything else, you acknowledge them, um, and you can tell you can give them examples of other people who have tried the same way and maybe have failed. You impress upon them the amount of time that it takes to stay stuck in your case, looking for something that you can have, and how your time is better spent, your money is better spent doing something else. Um, you try almost every trick in the book to get them to come outside themselves and see the transaction for what it is. When the children start getting involved, that's a more complicated problem. And that's you have people who are just really, really stuck, and there are oftentimes you can't unstick them.
Mm,
You just have to carry on and do the best you can for them. Um, that's the hard part, I think. That's hard. The money's kind of easy.
yeah.
Um, the custody stuff's pretty tough.
Yeah, that is tough. I mean, you have 4 kids, right?
I do.
Yeah,
I
what
do.
was that like, as you practiced and your kids were getting older? What have you learned from being a parent? How did that sort of translate into the way you practiced?
Well, I don't know how it translates into the way I practice. I mean, um, there are often times when there are people who are insisting that they have joint custody, right? Equal decision making. And I don't know about anyone else, but I know in my households, I always had a seat at the table for sure. Um, but when it came to the ultimate deciding vote, there was only one person that had that vote. Um, I maybe had a vote on some issues, but for the most part, um, I was lucky in that the mothers of all of my children, I've got my current wife, Dana, who is the mom to our two, and then I have a former wife who is the mom to the other two. Um, both of them are very, very able and insightful parents. And it was very easy for me to say, well, here's my thinking. And I knew I was being listened to. And as long as I was being listened to, that was good enough for me. Um, I don't think that that carries out very well in every other case. Um, there are plenty of people who have a seat at the table, but they not only want the seat at the table, they want the only seat at the table. Um, and I don't think that that's a very effective recipe for success going forward. There's going to be a lot of strife. There's going to be arguments. Um, they will try all of these other band-aids like parent coordinators or mediators and stuff like that. Sometimes those work, but at the end of the day, what you're trying to do is get someone to realize that maybe they aren't the only one who is smart enough and able enough to make the decision. Um, it's
Hmm,
an you have to evolve,
yeah.
I think, and I know I did. Um, it was it was difficult with my first wife. She wanted to move out of the city. Um, I had constructed for us a economic plan that would work for us and maintain everything that was going on. But notwithstanding that, she really didn't want to be in the city. The kids were 11 or I don't know, 10 and 6, 11 and 7. Um, and ultimately, I knew I could have nailed her feet to the floor here, but that just wasn't in everyone's interest. So they moved up to Rockland County. My relationship with the kids remained solid. I had a good working relationship with my former wife. Dana has a good working relationship with her. I mean, those kids are now 32 and 28. So that's a whole nother and newer situation.
What you said resonates with me so much, because I have experience working as a mediator, more on the financial side, but was there when, parenting plans were discussed back in Colorado. And it was interesting because when, it's easy to claim, well, I want joint custody, and that's it. But when you really break it down, one of my favorite conversations was, all right, so let's just break that down, what that would look like day to day. So you now work full time. Yes, yes. Okay, so little Johnny is in karate, Mary is in ballet. So just walk me what that would look like Monday through Friday, each of you.
Yep.
And oftentimes they realize, yeah, well, that's a problem.
Yep.
So, and you're right, sometimes it takes that for someone to paint that picture. The word evolve, yeah, that's a tough one, when someone's sort of in their pain and an anger comes out, and so it's not easy. And then thank you for describing also your co-parenting relationship. I've been through that myself, and after the initial, the intensity sort of wears off and you both realize, wait a second, you got these two kids and they'll try to play you against each other. And I remember the moment where, our kids were like, let's see, maybe six, similar age. And they're like, wait a second, did mom and dad just agree on something? That means I can't go to one and try to, pull one on the other. But if you can form a partnership, and kids just want everyone to get along, even if it means that, parents are no longer together, they're divorced, but they're getting along. They don't want to be stuck in the middle.
That's so right. That's so right. When my first wife and I split up, I bought an apartment in the same building as the apartment that we had owned as the marital residence. And there was an attended elevator. And so the kids were able to go up and down between the two apartments. But my former wife and I had a deal that your days with the kids are your days with the kids. They can't go, "Well, I'm going to go down and see mommy because I don't like what you're giving me for dinner," or whatever. And it worked very well, certainly for a while. And then after they moved to Rockland, it still worked okay. That kind of unified defense worked very well, and I think I was very lucky that I had a partner in that, because it's not only can the kids try and do it, but you can see parents doing it, and that happens normally long after we've left the picture. So there's little we can do for that. But if you see it happening, you try and stop it.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. Wow. And you work alongside your current wife, Dana, actually, in the same firm.
we do, and we have for, oh, I want to say 7 or 8 years now. Um, we learned early on that we don't represent people together. Kind of, similar or ancillary to the idea of parenting. Somebody's got to be in charge of the case, and and so she runs her cases, I run my cases. We will talk about them, of course, from time to time. But I know people are really surprised to find out that we don't go home and talk about work all night long. I mean, we've got a lot more interesting things to talk about and pressing things to talk about. But it's good. It's nice to be able to see each other during the day. Um, it's very helpful. It's very helpful. It works for us. I don't know. I know of one other couple that I know works together, and I think there's a second, and I can't remember who they are. But it's not common. It's really
No,
not common.
no. Um, it's I mean, my husband Glenn and I, we have two separate companies and we do not do the same work, but we have the same clients, we're in the same
Yep.
space, and same, we sometimes we talk shop. As a matter of fact, it was someone who said, "Oh my gosh, I wouldn't want to go to dinner with you two guys," because, but it's about growing the business. It's about just, AI, technological advances, but then there's shows and the dog and travel, and there's just so much to talk about. So I think, how do you actually, what is your view on, we had this conversation. People say opposites attract. I don't believe in that. We actually don't believe in that entirely. How do you feel about that saying?
Well, I think opposites is too strong.
Yeah.
I think there needs to be a balance. Um, for example, with respect to child rearing, Dana and I have a different view as to the risks that we would allow the children to take. Um, and she is more risk averse than I am. So, I would take the kids when they were young into our little playground that was in our neighborhood, that of course had an asphalt, you know, floor to it. There were monkey bars. Kids weren't wearing helmets. They could fall and they could get
Yeah.
hurt. Um, and I would be there pretty happily watching them. Dana, you could see that she would almost break out in hives watching the kids, and she'd just say, I'm out of here." So there was that. And then when it comes to managing our money, um, Dana, among other things, is a CPA before she became a lawyer, and so she is much more comfortable with certain financial instruments than I am. So I have the same sort of reaction to certain transactions that she's very comfortable engaging in, as she was with respect to watching me let the kids, run around on the monkey bars. So it's not so much that we're opposite, but we have different spheres of talent, I guess, and we allow each to have the latitude in those spheres to do and trust the other with what they're dealing with. Um, so
Complement in a complementary way. You complement each other. It sounds like it's almost like it broadens your view. And sometimes maybe even and that's just what lends true for me. It expands, your comfort level or really your ability to put yourself in somebody else's shoes.
that's
Um,
true.
yeah.
That's true.
Now, let's jump into something different. I understand let's talk about sailing.
Yeah.
Not just sailing. Tell me about offshore yacht racing. I mean, that sounds pretty intense and fun.
Well, it was a lot of fun. I mean, well, first of all, when you think of the word yacht, um, I think that a sailboat where you can stand up inside and not hit your head on the ceiling, well, that's a yacht. So, but I spent most of my time aboard a 60-foot sailboat that was kept in Maine mostly, but we raced it from Newport, Rhode Island to Bermuda a number of times. We raced it from Marblehead, Massachusetts to Nova Scotia. We raced it around Long Island Sound. I took it down to Antigua from New York. Um, so that's what I mean by it. I got involved in sailboat racing actually when I was in Tulsa, believe it or not. Uh,
Awesome.
Oklahoma has some very, very large man-made lakes. Um, when Carl Albert was Speaker of the House, he got the Army Corps of Engineers to build a bunch of dams, and there's a plenty of breeze, and so I learned to race small boats, one design boats. And then I got here, and through a number of circumstances, I got hooked up with a fellow who owned a racing sailboat, and I started racing with him here in Western Long Island Sound, and gradually just stepped up to bigger and bigger boats. Um, and the final one was that 60-footer.
Racing. Why racing?
Well, because after a while, it's like, so you go out and you sail the boat for an afternoon going around in a circle. I mean, it's like, okay, you know, you know,
Now what?
and on a weekend with a boat that'll only do, say, at most 7 or 8 miles an hour, if the wind is just right, you can only go so far. And after a few years, when you can't really make it, east of New Haven, um, and there's not that much to explore on the North Shore of Long Island once you get past Oyster Bay. Um, you need something to do, and competitive sailboat racing was a lot of fun. It was a lot of fun. I like teamwork a lot. Um, that was a huge part of the fun of that, and everybody's sort of racing the same kind of boat. Um, and I was single, and it was fun.
How fast do you go? I mean, well,
Well, the fastest that I ever went was on one of the first boats that I sailed. It was an ultralight for its time, and we were actually coming west um, through the little opening in the North Fork of Long Island called Plum Gut, and we had the tide was with us. And we had quite a breeze behind us, and we had every stitch of sail that we could have up. And even then, we did like 14.8 knots, which is maybe 16 miles an hour. I mean, it's just not all that fast, unless you're on the boat doing it.
yeah.
And it is, it's noisy, it's creaking. You can see the seams of the sails are stretching.
Wow.
Yeah, so it was fun, and I've been in some fairly harrowing um, circumstances where I was extraordinarily fearful of what was going on. We got caught in a storm in the Atlantic when I was on the trip to Antigua, just
Wow.
between New York and like the northern end of the Gulf Stream. A a storm came through, and it was nighttime, and it was lightning, and it was rain, and the sea gets all confused because the wind is shifting direction, so the waves shift direction. Um, you feel pretty much out of control, and you can hear the wave behind you kind of start to hiss just before it breaks. And it would like break like right on you as you're standing in the back of this boat. And you're tied into the boat with a nylon tether. It was really scary. It was really scary. But I tell
Wow.
you, it takes a lot to scare me now.
I know the bar went up high.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
I can't even imagine I mean, what would you do if you couldn't practice law? Would it be related to sailing?
Oh, gee, I don't know. I keep thinking of that. I'm no youngster. And so every now and then, like Dana and I are talking about, well, what comes next?
Yeah.
Um, and there's only so much golf you can play. Um, I'm not I'm not as nimble as I was when I was 30 racing boats, so I don't think I would do that. I really don't know. I really don't know. I think I would. I'd love to teach civics in high school.
Hmm.
I'd like to do that.
Why?
Um, because I think it is a base of knowledge that really needs to be imported to our up and coming citizens. I mean, I know we're not talking politics here, so I'm not even going to start. But the absence of knowledge of what makes the country tick, and how we got to where we are and where we thought we were going to be, I think that would be something very useful for our young people to know.
Absolutely. And on that note, what would be your advice for incoming attorneys?
Um, it kind of sounds trite, but try being nice, you
Hmm.
know?
Yeah.
Uh, you talk to people that are practicing now, and the level um, of angry discourse that is coming from the lawyers, it it's at a level that I've never seen before, and I don't like it. Um, I don't know what the source of that is. It could be the fact that this is just clients who are demanding some sort of resolution, some sort of progress in their case, and we can't get it. because the court system is not helping us. Um, you know, I don't think we've ever really recovered from the slowdown in COVID, and I don't see the justification for it aside of that maybe there are people who are just not paying as much attention as they should. Um, but there's a ripple effect of this, and there's it's very hard to to steer your way clear of the fury of your client. Um, and you need to realize that your adversary is someone that you're going to see again and again and again. And you're going to need them to be understanding. You're going to need them to be cooperative. You're not on the right side of every case every time. And that's what I would think young lawyers ought to know.
Yeah, don't forget to be human first.
Yeah.
I've noticed the same. There's this new level of tension and demand for responsiveness, uber responsiveness, and I think many people are on edge. There's fear, and to me, it doesn't mean you have to subject yourself to it and um, react to it, and just and then I think taking it personally, that's always a mistake. Uh, so that's a very good advice. I like that. And in the last thought, just as you said, being nice, when you have one of those days, maybe dealing with people like that, what instantly puts a smile on your face?
Hmm. Trying to recognize the absurdity of something. Um, you know, like I hear a mother telling me that Johnny has to be home Sunday night so that she can get him ready for school Monday, while daddy wants the kid Friday night to say Monday morning, which of course works because that way you're transferring the child through school, not handed off like a commodity from daddy to mommy. And so you appeal, say, to mommy by saying, well, you don't want the child handed off like a commodity. The child won't react to that. That sometimes works. And then I try, wouldn't you like to have Sunday to yourself? Don't you understand that when the kid comes home from you from daddy, he probably hasn't had a bath. His clothes aren't washed. The homework isn't done. The lunch isn't made. Why don't you let him do it? And
Yeah.
sometimes you can get just that reaction, that kind of knowing smile, and that's what kind of amuses me is if I can get that where someone else can match me by going, you know, my position maybe doesn't make as much sense as I thought it did. Um, that'll do it. That'll
Yeah.
do it. And then I've got a wonderful cadre of associate lawyers here. Um, they are pretty much all, well, mostly under 35, and they're smart and they're bright and they're fun. And I can walk out of my office and talk to them, and there's usually something going on that's fun.
Yeah, it's like extended family.
Yeah, they're good folks.
Yeah. Wow, Michael, thank you so much for sharing your story and just a part of really your authentic self. I really, really, truly, truly appreciate that.
It was my pleasure. Well, like any other lawyer, what can be more fun than talking about yourself?
You'd be surprised. It throws people off. People can talk about what they do, the work they do all day long, but talking about themselves, really truly being seen, that doesn't come as easily. And you seem to be comfortable in 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 talking about who you really are and your thought process and I really appreciate that. I've been really seeing a shift. People who've been on a podcast and share themselves and then heard others. Sometimes I hear, oh, I did not know that about that person. We've been
Right.
together, we've been in the same field for like 20 years. So I think it raises the humanness a little bit, lifts it, and that's
Right.
a good thing.
There was a guy, I don't know if you knew him, Phil Greenhouse.
Yep.
Um,
Mm.
he was an Academy Fellow. He died a number of years ago, and I went to his funeral And I heard people talking about him, and I know I spoke to some of my colleagues at the time and said, that's just a goddamn shame that the only time you find out about somebody is at their funeral. Um, so at that point, I kind of made sort of a resolution to myself that I don't think people should wait till my funeral. So,
No, there you go. That's a start.
yeah.
Well, thank you so much. And for our listeners, viewers who want to find out how to get hold of Michael Stutman, we'll make sure that we'll link your bio below. And be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel, Beyond the Bar Podcast. Follow us on all social media. And until next time, stay curious and stay inspired.